Good day to you. My name's Tony Ballinger from the Fighting Men of Rhodesia YouTube series. Today we're privileged to have as our guest Andre Odendaal. He was a captain in the South African Defence Forces and he served in 5 Recce, 5-4 Commando and 5-3 Commando. So one of the reasons why we've brought him into the Rhodesian network is that he served with Rhodesian soldiers of note. So that's good enough for us to bring him on board. And without further ado, Andre, welcome to the show. And can you tell us where you were born, raised, went to school, and how you got into the military?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was born in South Africa in Pretoria. My dad was a pilot in the South African Air Force, actually also involved in the Rhodesian conflict. He headed up the Light Aircraft Command, which is all the Alouettes and helicopters in the 70s. So he was involved in the conflict there. Yeah, I was born in one military hospital in Pretoria, and then my dad retired when I was about 15 and moved down to George in the coast, and I went to high school in George, York High School, and was conscripted to the military when I was 18 years old.
Wow, that's quite a background with your dad there. Is he still alive, Andre?
He is not. No, he's an very interesting person on his own. He flew in World War II in Korea. He flew Mustangs, and he's pretty much older. And yeah, he stayed in South African Air Force, and then helped build up the Light Aircraft Command. My brother was also in the Air Force, and he was an Impala pilot. And he got killed in an accident as well. And because of that, I was actually conscripted to the medics because they wanted me to, because our family had already lost one family member, they sent me to the safer call up. So my initial call up was, a pretty safe one.
That's very common. Yeah, in the Rhodesian army, we had the same thing where a brother was killed, the other guy had lesser duties after that. So carry on from that point, Andre. What happened after that?
Yeah, so I was called up to medics, and I served my first year in the medics. I was trained as an officer, an instructor officer. So did ops medic training and just normal basic infantry training, and then became a second lieutenant in the medics. And then I went up to the border and did a short stint in Ndangwa as a kind of ops medic, and then I was attached to one of the camping units that was coming up to do a stint to Transvaal Scottish as their medic, and then I was involved in their training, their counterinsurgency training to get ready to deploy. And I was kind of really enjoying the infantry side of things. And after that, I applied to go to the infantry and get transferred. So they transferred me to infantry school. And I had to do my whole officers training all over again. So I spent my first 2 years basically doing jails and officers training. And so at the end of my second year in the army, I was a second lieutenant, infantry second lieutenant. And then I clawed out, and but I applied for short service already, but I clawed out, and I hadn't heard anything. So I spent a couple of months at home in George just surfing, and then I got my call-up papers they accepted me for short service, and they sent me to the Bushman Unit 201 Battalion. But I had to do a short stint. I had to do my formative officer training first, so they sent me to Pretoria, to the headquarters of Pretoria, and that was actually when all the when the riots. This was in 84, and the riots were just internal unrest was becoming huge. And I was actually in the ops office at the time when these telexes were just coming through from all the riots and unrest and everything going on, which is kind of interesting to see at that time. But I then got sent to the formative training, and after that I was sent up to Omega to become a platoon commander with the Bushman, and so I flew up there and started my sort of formal official infantry training as an infantry officer in operational circumstances.
In South African officer training, what percentage is admin, law, strategic studies, blah blah blah, versus actual practical, hands-on stuff that you would learn later?
Yeah, just about all of it is practical hands-on stuff. Later on you do, as an officer, then you have to come back and do your admin courses, logistics and legal and those things. So you have to do those. But yeah, the junior leaders course is just, it's all just applied, section leading training, platoon tactics, all that kind of stuff. So very, very practical. And we also did, urban and rural as well. So, just covered everything. Yeah.
So, and also classical war, where you would wear helmets and get deployed with tanks and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, not so much. No, that was later. I mean, later when I was, to become a captain, I had to do that kind of, what combat teams they called it. Yeah, but not as to become a second lieutenant. That was just mainly just like platoon tactics, mainly aimed at counterinsurgency operations.
Because the South African tankers and gunners in the Second World War, particularly in North Africa, actually got a very good reputation. And
Yeah.
I've said this in other South African interviews. It was, I think, an American general that said, "Give me 4 divisions of Yanks to invade, 2 divisions of Brits to hold the ground, and 1 division of South Africans to end the war." So yeah, no, wonderful. And then what happened after that, Andre?
So my first deployment, I was sent as a kind of platoon sergeant, even though I was an officer, because I hadn't gone through the whole normal cycle. The normal cycle with a unit like that is that they'll get their new batch of officers coming into the unit, and then they'll do orientation with them, get them orientated to their tactics, and then deploy them. So I hadn't been through that. So I spent my first deployment with a senior lieutenant as kind of the platoon sergeant to kind of learn how to do things. And then after that, I was deployed, and what we typically were deployed for was just get put into an area and just try to pick up any insurgency coming down into Namibia. It depended on what was going on politically. We were sometimes in Angola, sometimes in Namibia, and it was pretty uneventful. I can't say I was like involved in a lot of combat. Whenever we went into Angola, I would be kind of pushing the edge a little bit and try and get as close to the enemy bases as possible. You're young and you kind of adventurous, and a couple of times we got bombed by the bases, and during that time we found a lot of caches, weapons, mortar caches. We lifted quite a lot of landmines. My team lifted about 30 landmines in the time that I was deployed. And I got blown up myself, riding up where I shouldn't have been. So I was actually personally blown up and Kazavak to South Africa. So that is the kind of operation. It was just low level counterinsurgency. Nothing like the Rhodesian Bush War, or pretty low level. I think the SWAPO was really struggling to infiltrate, and then obviously there were more specialist units like 101 Battalion and Kufut, who had the local population and had the intel. The problem with the Bushmen was that there was this friction between the Bushmen and the local population, and they just kind of hated each other. So we would never get any intel. So the only things we found was ourselves from tracking and just picking up spoor ourselves. Which is it's a pretty vast area. So you're like spending the day just driving around trying to find something. And a couple of times we did find spoor, and we followed up, but they pretty much every time got away, got really close to the bases, and we had to pull back. So that's kind of what it was like. We did some support for 101 Battalion. There's quite a big operation where we had to go up and set up a helicopter staging area, and there I actually found some really fresh spoor, and we followed up and we came into base, and they just evacuated and they just ran across the river, and we kind of fired at them with RPGs and mortars, but they were too far away, and they were firing back, and that's the extent of it. It's just 6 weeks on doing these counterinsurgency operations. Sometimes a specialist mission, but that is pretty much it. I mean, for a young man, it was pretty exciting. Yeah. Out there you have command of a whole platoon, and you have all this autonomy. So it was kind of fun, and not too dangerous. Although I suppose it is pretty dangerous. Thinking back now, I got through it all. So yeah.
Like, I guess with the Bushmen, they're all pretty universally darn good trackers, aren't they? And
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
so you would probably use more in a information gathering and reconnaissance role at that point.
No, yeah, not so much. The Bush War actually worked a lot of information, but tracking as well. And I mean, the Wombers themselves were excellent trackers. They knew their local area better than even the Bushmen because you have the subtleties of how people work and move in the kraals and everything. So the Womber units were superb because, and especially units like Kufut or 101, they would stop and their guys would go off to the kraals, and a lot of them were family members there, and they knew what was going on. And they'd get intel immediately, and they'll know where smoke would come down, and then they'd be directed to where they were, and then they'd follow up really quickly. So they were really effective, and their contact kill rate was very high. The Bushmen wasn't as high because we just didn't have the intel, and it is a different dynamic completely. But yeah, that's I mean, compared to 101 or Kufut, our kill rate was much lower.
Is 3-2 Battalion Kufut? Is that another name for them, or
no. So 3-2 Battalion was another beast. So 3-2 Battalion was a lot of ex-FNLA and ex-Angolan folks that were trained by us, but they were a conventional unit, and they were different. So they were used in a lot of the conventional missions and attacks, and they were. I worked with Kufut when I was in special with 3-2 when I was in special forces, and they were really professional and formidable. I think they were like more in style of what the Rhodesians knew, in RLI and everything, but actually, maybe a step up. I think Jane's Defense Weekly considered them the best light infantry in the world at the time. They were really formidable, yeah, and very professional in how they worked, yeah. No, so they were different. 101 and Kufut was a police unit using Caspers, so they actually operated under the police, and that's how they got the intel, because they were like semi paramilitary. Terrible discipline, fire discipline and combat discipline, but very effective. It's because they got the intel, and I mean, it was kind of like, you'd have 5 or 6 Caspers chasing down 3 or 4 guys trying to run away. It was, and then when they contact, they would just go crazy. They would just like fire, like just go crazy. Yeah.
I think it was 3-2 Battalion that attacked with South African armor at Quito, Carnival, the Tumpa Triangle.
Yeah. 3-2 is involved in all the big and some other ones, and yeah, I mean that is actually a unit to study on. It sounds a very, very formidable unit, very professional unit. Yeah.
And tell me, how did you feel South Africa could have coped overall with the Cubans and the MPLA? You guys obviously could call on a large amount of manpower. Was it an unequal fight, you guys being on the superior side, or the other way around?
It is kind of the other way around. In later on, we got down to just the Cubans and the Angolan government had superior, air, and they had missiles as well. So the SAM missile infrastructure was being set up, and we were struggling we had no air superiority anymore, and we couldn't replace aircraft because of the sanctions and everything. So we were hesitant to do that, and also the South African government was also hesitant to lose troops, like conscript troops. So they were relying heavily on 3-2 Battalion, 101 Battalion, Kufut, special forces units to fight the war. We were mainly non-white soldiers, right? So people don't realize that most of the combat and most of the elite units in South African military were black soldiers, So the conscripts. Well, the conscript units came up and they served, and they were involved. 6-1 Mech especially was involved in some of the big attacks. They typically weren't daily involved in daily operations and daily actions. There was mainly white leaders with these black units. So it's an interesting question. I think the big differentiator was the air superiority. I was actually involved in the last kind of combat or conflict with the Cubans when they came down to the border, and I mean they had T-54 tanks, they had a lot of tanks and everything. I think had it become a more conventional attack, I think we probably would have won because we were close to the border then. But we had no depth really. We had or the depth was too far. The flying from getting from South Africa, getting our units up to air units up to Namibia, and controlling that space was quite daunting compared to the resources that they had with the Soviet Union. It's just like blank check, giving them what they needed.
Yeah, they had MiG-23s, didn't they? And flankers, or whatever you call them.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I know the Mirage has struggled with them. I think one guy was shot down.
Yeah.
And eventually they had to learn the South African pilots had to learn how to drop their bombs by skipping it from miles away, so
Exactly
that
right.
they can
Yeah.
actually get anywhere near the anti-aircraft system.
Yeah.
Which is quite an intricate tactic, really, when you consider that satellite navigation and all that type of stuff wasn't really available then. It was just by the gut of your pants, really.
No, totally. And even, as us for navigation and everything, exactly. Everything was just counting steps. Yeah. It is complicated.
Although the quality of the South African pilots was better, I think I've got a book here where one of your top pilots actually opened the Top Gun school in America, or was involved in it being founded, and
No, you're right. I mean,
performed very well against the Americans. So, moving on, Andre, what happened after that?
Yeah, so I was I got blown up by a landmine, and when I came back after recovering, I came back and they didn't want to send me on operations anymore, so I had to, I was involved in training. I wasn't getting on really well with the leadership of the unit at all. It's very conservative. I'm kind of a bit more, wouldn't say liberal, but I'm a bit more, it's just a different mentality, which I actually think I saw a lot in the Rhodesians that I met, like not as rigid in thinking. So I wasn't getting on very well with my leadership at all. So I actually applied to go to 3-2 Battalion. I wanted to go there. 3-2 is a very innovative unit with different mindset, and it got denied by my commanding officer. Ironic, because he didn't like me at all, but he was happy to keep me. So then I applied for Special Forces, which he couldn't deny. So I applied for Recce selection. So he couldn't deny that. So I got, everybody was entitled to do the pre-selection. So I got the orders to go down to Durban to do pre-selection, and then try and get into Special Forces. So I actually, at this stage, I was when I knew it was coming up, I actually started training really hard, even on operations. So I was like running spoor with the Bushmen. I was at nights. I took weights with me on my vehicles, and I was like doing weights in the all-round defense at night, and pull-ups and push-ups, and so I was trying to get myself into good shape, because I knew that the whole, this is a different beast. And I was also, when we were back in base, I was just, it was in winter, I was like doing cold showers and everything, because I knew that there was interrogation stuff, and it involves a lot of cold and things. So I was doing cold showers to prepare myself and everything. So I was in good shape by the time I went down, and I went down with somebody else from Amiga as well, and we both I did the pre-selection and passed the pre-selection, and it was pretty tough. Pre-selection was like, pull-ups, push-ups, leg thrusts, sprints on the rugby field, carrying a buddy, all with straight after each other. I think you had to do like 12 pull-ups, 60 push-ups. The normal thing. It's not easy. It's like straight after, and then with a 5K run after that, and you had to do the 5K under 20 minutes, which is not easy. And then we had a route march. So past that, got through that, and then we were on the initial pre-selection cycle, which was basically giving infantry, basically a bridged infantry training course for folks that had come in who weren't infantry qualified, because we had people from all over coming in. So did that, then selection itself, which is 3 days. It's been spoken about a lot. Very tough and off. Yeah.
Andre, was it restricted entirely white troops at that point, or had they got
good question. Good question. At that point, in my initial cycle was only white troops.
Mm-hmm.
But my cycle was basically decimated. 8 of us finished. 8 of us qualified. Or 8 of us finished selection. So they held us back for the next cycle to come through, because they didn't want to train 8 people. And while they held us back, we were doing heavy weapons training down at Durban. So we did anti-tank, anti-air, and anti-mortar with the then operators, from recce, 4 recce. So that was really, really interesting and cool to do while we were waiting for the next cycle to come through. And the next cycle, when it came through, was the first cycle that allowed South African black soldiers. So we had about 6 or 7 South African black soldiers, guys from the local tribes. So that was the first time they did that, and this was in 1987.
And I think the success rate, certainly prior to independence, was about 5% of guys passed.
Yeah, I think on the website it's a 0.5% or something. It is pretty hard. I mean, it is ridiculous. I mean, so even out of us 8, 6 of us finished in the end, and I don't know how many. You start off they start off by going to all the units, and there's pre-selections for each unit, and then guys come to Durban for. So there's a fair amount of people start off just to get to the selection. On my selection, I think about 30 of us actually made it to selection. Because you just get whittled out before then, and then of those 38 of us finished, and out of the 8, 6 finished. So yeah, it was pretty tough. And the interesting thing is, like, I'm not the best athlete or the best. There were some good athletes and everything, so I'm not the best or the biggest or the strongest. It's just a matter of I think having a lot of luck from not getting injured, and then also just not giving up, I guess. So. Yeah.
And were you able to retain your rank, or do they strip you of that and you all have to be equal?
So yes, also good. So you were equal, but if you had rank, you had to do the leadership tasks, which was harder. So whenever you were in the training, when we were planning anything, there's obviously somebody had to be the leader. Then you had to be that as well. So you had to do the orders and the planning and everything as well as executing. So you're all equal, but you kept your rank, and you acted as the leader according to your rank. Yeah. So there were actually 4 of us lieutenants on our cycle. 5. Yeah. So we all basically headed up a stick or section in the training, but we were responsible. Then we had to do all the leadership during the training as well. Yeah.
And how long was that course for, Andre?
So it was a year. So after selection, it was about a year's training. We went through all different phases. We went to 4 recce and did small boats, and we did demolitions, and we did advanced air training. We did what they call dark phase, which was really, really dark, where we got trained by ex ANC guys who had been captured and turned. I think it's a similar. I think Sulu Scouts did a similar thing. They would catch, guys would be captured but turned to fight for us. So the dark phase was basically undergoing enemy training, which is really, really hard. I mean, really bare bones. And then building up to minor tactics, which was about 3 months up in the Caprivi, where we just put through our paces on the smaller teams tactics, not small teams, but minor tactics, like section level tactics for special forces, which involved everything you would be doing from ambushes, breakout of encirclement, laying caches, laying mines, anything that a special forces unit would be doing. And then we went back to Durban and we did a urban training as well, which is then basic, urban combat and some sort of starting to get towards hostage release stuff. And then that was the end of the cycle. Then we finished and we qualified, and during that period they also evaluated us to see which of the recce units to go to. So we had 5-1. We had 1 recce which was done in Durban, which they were mainly urban missions and obviously supporting any big counterinsurgencies, and then 4 recce which is water based, and then 5 recce which is more counterinsurgency. I think more aligned with what the SAS and Sulu Scouts was doing in Rhodesia. And so during that time they evaluated us. They actually wanted me to go to 4 recce, but I'm not a fan of cold water, and so I decided not to. And I really wanted to go to 5 recce. And then during our minor tactics phase at the end, the small teams commander came up to interview folks for small teams, which is another speciality, which is created by Chris Schulenberg, which is this two-man recce concept. And then a couple of us applied for that, and we were given the opportunity to go and then do another small selection to get into that unit, which involved some intense training as well. So that is how I kind of got into the into the small team side. But I just wanted to mention from our whole cycle of training now, we had some Rhodesian ex-SAS folks who trained us as well. One person stands out to mind is Paddy Giblin. He's well renowned with any South African Special Forces. He was ex British Marine, Irish, served in the SAS, and he was extremely professional in his training and very particular and very tough. But he put us through our paces, and I really attribute like all my skills to him. He was really professional and particular and stuff. He would do things like, we would be told to fall in with full water bottles and full kit, and then he would go around there, and if your water bottle was not full, like 100% full, it was just a nightmare for you. So he was pretty detail oriented guy, and we would always be pulled over, and our equipment was checked. We had to be carrying everything we were carrying and everything. He just would not let us. He was on it all the time. And he also was the fitness instructor. So, when we were doing minor tactics, we would go out the whole day and throughout the night, maybe even sleep in the bush, come back, and then still have to do PT at 6 a.m. And he would be with us, and then he'd be the PT instructor, and we'd be doing PT. And he was a very fit guy. So everybody kind of feared Paddy, but really respected Paddy. So he was one of the Rhodesians that stood out for our training. And I think, again, it's a testament to his British training, but also the training that he had in the SAS as well.
And what did Shirley bring to the table? Because he was a renowned lone operator or paired operator. What did he bring to the table that helped you? So
I was so privileged to meet him because, I got into small teams, and this is now getting towards. This is 1988. Things were kind of wrapping up with the war, and the Cubans were coming down, and we just qualified, and we qualified in small teams. So we got sent up to Angola to Ondangwa at the time. Shulis was in Ondangwa. He was I don't know what he was doing, but he was staying in a house there on his own. I think he was kind of advising the sector, and then because we were small teams and our commander knew of him, he kind of latched on to us, and he helped me plan a couple of missions. And personally, I personally built a relationship with him, spent time with him, and actually because of his advising and not following the doctrine that we'd been taught, I think it actually saved my life, because he was telling me basically how he operated and the things he would do to prevent being compromised in the forms of setting up booby traps over his tracks and everything, which is something that we were told not to do, and we were not advocated at all. And I took his advice and actually personally had carried my own booby trap device set that I'd set up, and on one of the missions that I was on, we were compromised from contact. So we were infiltrating with a big group of UNITA, and the MPLA had found out about it. Obviously, I'd been compromised, and they followed us. And the one day they attacked us, and basically, I saw the fire line, and they were shooting at me. UNITA all ran away, and I managed to evade and just get away from it all. And the first thing I did was I put up my booby trap, set it up, and then moved on, and then connected with my partner. And then we heard the booby trap go off. So they were tracking us, and the booby trap stopped them. And then we were able to evade and make comms and get further south, and then get picked up by a helicopter. So had I not done that and followed his advice, I don't think I'd be here today. So I met him and just listened to how he operated and tried to get to know him. He helped plan operations for us. He had a computer at the time, which was like 87, 88. Who had computers? He was in Namibia with a computer, typing up, planning and doing stuff. So he's a very innovative guy, but very humble guy as well. He was like a really nice person, not a arrogant person at all. Very nice and really keen to give advice, but also very anti-authoritarian. So I think a lot of us liked him for that. He was on his own mission for sure. But I really liked him. Yeah.
I love the commentary of in Ron Reed Daly's book, where General Lutz, I think it was one of the top guys in the South African Defence Force, was sitting there with Ron Reed Daly, and you could hear these footsteps and slip-slops coming down the passageway. slip, slop, slip, slop. And he comes with this big bushy beard, and he doesn't salute anybody. He just says, hello, Uncle Ron, to Ron Reed Daly, and the general's eyes and his polished riding boots are just bursting out of
Yeah.
his head, you know. Yeah, what a character.
He was a character. He had really interesting ideas about fitness as well. Like he didn't believe in running or anything either. So he's like, you don't like, so he had really interesting ideas about things, but he was, he was a very, yeah, so I was really, really happy to meet him. And I met him I met him again, after I'd left the military. I tried to come back to South African Army. It just wasn't working, but he was then heading up, he was in the Special Forces Intelligence section, and I had another conversation with him then. And actually, he brokered before Executive Outcomes, the security company started. He kind of brokered a meeting where guys was getting set things up. I met him at his house for that, but I decided not to join that. So yeah, I bumped into him a couple of times after that. But very private guy. I don't know where he is now. I do know. So somebody else who's super influential was who worked with him was Dave Scales. I don't know if you know Dave Scales. Dave Scales is the radio, yeah, it's a specialist. It is his specialist comms support. So whenever he did operations, Dave Scales was his comms support, and so they had this like very advanced method of communications, which is complicated, as you know, when you are close to the enemy. They're obviously trying to pick up any radio signal. So if you're trying to communicate, you have to be extremely efficient in your communication, so they can't triangulate on you and find out where you are. So Dave Scales invented a couple of processes and procedures which we followed, and he was part of 5-4, and he set up a whole communications methodology. So Dave was super influential, but I do know that Dave was Dave and Shuli always worked together. And Dave Scales, I'm in touch with him now. He's in London. I think he's trying to write a book. I don't know if you've spoken to him at all, but he might be somebody really worthwhile speaking to, because he went through all of the Zulu Scouts.
I'm
5 Recce stuff.
absolutely desperate. I'm desperate to interview Shuli, and maybe Dave will be kind enough to let me know where he is, or even interview Dave. But
I'll forward you his details. But these folks are very, very, very private, as you know.
They are very private, and I respect that. But for the sake of history and what they know, they must either write a book or talk to us, but not die and leave it at all behind.
So I got to tell you, I actually served in the Israeli military as well. After South Africa, I went to Israel, and I was trying to get into their special force and everything, and nobody would believe me that we operated in teams of 2. They actually would not believe me. So I think the rest of the world has not really learned that technique. Maybe now it's not able, you can't do it anymore now, but even like, so I was in this escape and evasion scenario where I from contact, but even other operations I did, we would infiltrate, and we would, I walked into enemy bases, and walked on bridges and measured bridges, and so 2 of us would be doing these things, and no other military's done that. I know the British SAS didn't operate in, or still don't operate in small sticks like that, and then the Americans definitely don't. And if you look at movies like Lone Survivor, where you have these teams of 4 or 5 that go in, and they totally different mindset. So Chris taught us, and we were taught, like, you are not a combat. You don't have the combat mindset. You're not there to kill people or start shooting. You're in a different mindset. So we weren't thinking like that. Where I think a lot of these aggressive British SAS and American Special Forces are very aggressive, and they're in the combat mindset, which you can't be in reconnaissance. It's just a different way of thinking. I mean, I was even criticized for supposedly running away in my situation. I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Custer's last stand, me against like, a company of people. It's like totally stupid. So, people didn't understand the mentality, and special forces people being, a lot of them are very aggressive and good soldiers. But the small teams mindset is a totally different mindset. I mean, you're only walking at night. You're carrying up to 100 kilograms, literally carrying 100 kilograms, because you're carrying a lot of water. You avoid all local population. You can't leave any spoor. You can't go to water holes, because the locals, they'll pick you up. So it's a totally different mindset. And then when you get to within, the enemy, you are on your own. You're on your own, and if you get compromised, you're on your own. So totally different game, and I don't think people understand that, and somehow it hasn't. It's not a lesson that's been learned, but I just can't believe that he actually did it, mastered started the whole concept, and some innovative South Africans picked it up and took it on, and Didi's and Jack Greff and those folks took it on and were excellent operators, small team operators themselves. Yeah.
So tell me, the war had been going on 11 years by that point in Southwest Africa. Why did it take so long for the South Africans to get to this level of understanding with small teams, do you think? Were they more conventionally orientated, or what was...
No, there'd always been a lot of, but it's interesting how South Africans used special forces as well. So, we weren't, because it was Namibia, it wasn't like Rhodesia where we were in constant threat, So it was detached, and the political situation was always changing. So, you were allowed to be in Angola, you weren't allowed to be in Angola. So it was in Angola. So it was always changing, but also the distances are pretty vast as well. I mean, same in Rhodesia, you're operating in Mozambique and the same thing, but it just wasn't, the intensity wasn't the same as with the Rhodesians. So DDs and those folks did some really interesting reconnaissances, went into some of the big bases, onto the flight decks, and so there was a lot that happened. They did some operations in the west of Angola, laying mines and doing things, but I think the intensity wasn't the same as what you folks had.
I know, going back to the radio scene that Shully did with the other fellow, there was an American that visited South Africa in the 70s, I think it was, looking at South African weaponry. He was very impressed with what was made there. And what he was really impressed with was the frequency hopping
that's what we used.
You could basically talk, and the frequency would change as you were talking.
Yeah, not only that. So we had the frequency hopping radios, but we also had, and this is in 86, 87, we also had a data entry terminal. So this is before computers really, this is like, you'd have a little terminal, you type in all your details. It is limited amount of data you could type in all your details. That got encrypted. You plug that into the Syncal 30, the frequency hopping radio, and then you'd go up, you'd have a sked time, and basically you tune your radio with a dummy antenna, so they couldn't pick up the tuning signal. So you tune your radio, and then at the time the base would come online at the same time, and then you would just push go, and obviously you have to sync first, so that the two radios get in sync on the frequency syncing, because you have the codes that you use which set up the frequencies so that they're hopping in the same frequencies, and then we'd send the information through in this burst transmission, which took a second. So you'd have this whole text messages sent over the frequency hopping, and that is in 86, 85. We were doing that already. When the Angolan War ended, and we were getting ready for independence in Namibia, everybody came down. UNTAG was down there, and the British were there, and everything. And I actually got into one of the British comms rooms, and I looked at the equipment, and it was like archaic. The stuff they had, it was like massive, like everything was like, the equipment was terrible compared to what we had. But South Africa was really good in that we bought people, basically, got the smartest people and just built all the stuff up. So our equipment was superb. When I went to Israel, I was so disappointed. I couldn't believe the quality of the equipment and stuff. South African equipment was really, really spot on. As you said, our radio signals equipment is great. Our vehicles were great. The Caspers.
Fantastic.
The weapons were great. We had the best of everything. Like, it was really had the best. When I went to Israel and I saw the stuff they had there, I was like, oh, this is like really disappointing. So very different.
The Yanks didn't even have sloping armor under their trucks until about the 90s or something.
No, exactly.
And a lot of the vehicles are made by the South Africans, aren't they? Particularly
they are. So I was privileged enough to do my master's degree in Chicago at Northwestern University, and we did a course on innovation. And this guy came in and started giving a course on how combat and military warfare furthers innovation. And he was talking about Iraq and Afghanistan, and how combating IEDs and landmines led to the MRAP vehicles now, and and went on about it. And I put up my hand and I said, do you know that is like 80s South African technology? And he did not know. And then I told him the story. Denel
70s.
developed that,
Yeah.
sold it. Yeah, 70s. Oh no, you came from you guys, exactly. So it started in Rhodesia. So, but then Denel perfected that. They sold the contract to the British, and the British. So he did not even know that connection. So you're so excited that that's the whole evolution of it. I think a lot of the innovation brought in, I think, by Rhodesians initially, just has been forgotten. It even like the military tactics of when you go into contact or whatever, that we learned from you, the Rhodesians, which was adopted by South Africa. When I went to Israel and I saw their infantry tactics, they got terrible, and they've never learned the lesson. They have got really bad tactics, which is why they lose a lot of their leaders in contacts. And they just haven't learned from. Nobody's learned from that the Bush War in Rhodesia or Angola. Nobody's learned the lessons. This is crazy.
Well, I watched a documentary the other night of Israeli troops, and I do respect them, so I'm not knocking them, but they were clearing a building in northern Gaza, and I
Yeah.
couldn't believe how noisy they were. They were all
Yeah.
yelling away and yammering
No,
at each
yeah,
other. You don't
yeah,
do that when you're
yeah.
in an urban environment.
No, it's everything's. Well, I mean, urban is different. It's a bit different from the bush, but watch how guys move around. It all becomes a bit Hollywoodish. Like watch how these units walk. Everybody's walking around, guns pointing while all these like weird things. There's no observation. It's just everything's very different, and people suffer as a result. That's why the Western tactics are not working in Ukraine. Because they just went too far to some.
But
I don't know. That's very different. Yeah.
that's a very
Yeah.
interesting observation you've made, Andre. These guys walking with the weapon raised, looking down the sight. You can't
It's like
see diddly squat doing that, can you?
It's like, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I don't know how they evolved. I mean, with that, I mean, and also it's not a sense of like, buddy buddy. One guy's waiting, covering,
Yeah.
other guy's moving, observing. They don't do that. I don't know why.
There's
Anyhow, what do I know?
at least 40% of your observation is blocked
Yeah,
out. So it's
exactly. Yeah. So you have
ridiculous.
peripheral vision and everything.
Going back to your actual experiences in Five Recce, could you give us a few specific examples of moving into a camp, how you did it, why you chose the area that you based up in to observe the enemy? What did you look for?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you cover your tracks? A very sandy part of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So typically when we planned our operation, we had limited satellite photos and we had obviously aerial photos. So we try and get as much information about the whole area as possible. So infiltration. So you plan your infiltration and try and find areas that were far away from local pop to hold up for the day. But that is not always possible, right? So yeah, we plan it beforehand. We plan the whole mission. We plan where we're going to lie up every day, and then at the same time you'd be planning your escape and evasion routes as well. So if you hit contact at any point, you have your RVs to meet up, and it's all planned with the support team, so they would know if you were in this location and something happened, you would be going to that extraction point and you'd be meeting up there, and that's where they would be getting you and what the next one was and everything. So we'd plan everything pretty well, pretty exquisitely. And then, obviously what you're looking for is as dense bush as possible to lie up in, as far away from locals as possible. That is the main thing to get to the target. My main operations were west of the Kunene, at the time when the Cubans were coming down. This was like 88. The Cubans were kind of pushing down. So my small team operations were then, and we were then trying to find any evidence of crossing bridges, crossing rivers, and points where they would be, setting up to bring armor across, because some of the bridges were pretty compromised across the rivers already, just through the conflict, and for them to bring armor down would be kind of hard for them to do. So that is our primary task on the one op, was to see how they're crossing the Humbe River was the river they're trying to cross. So me and Mike Mashai, who was a Zulu Scout operative, he was my partner. So we were tasked to go up and just recce and see what we could find out about how they were setting up to cross. So we planned our infiltration. We kind of, obviously, you try and get as close to the target as possible, and then you're going to spend a day or two getting into the target, and you've always got to get out and not leave tracks, as you said, so that you can come back just to check things out, because there's vast distances and you're walking, so everything's pretty slow. So what we would do is, when you get really close to the area, when you know you're in the area, we would then ditch our kit and cache our kit, and then we'd be operating for maybe a day or night or two, just with webbing and light kit. So you'd be carrying whatever you need to, and just sleeping wherever you could, just finding a place to hold up. But not tracking. We actually had we had these massive, like, actually I sent you the picture of Mike Michaud. If you look at his feet, we had these massive shoe covers that we put on that really covers the track. But then also it's just very cautious walking as well. So you're always conscious of walking very, very cautiously. Now any local is going to see something suspicious, but they're not looking for something like that. Typically they're looking for boot tracks or whatever. So it gives you some level of hiding yourself. So that's what you do. And obviously, you're walking kind of. I was actually watching this Dune 2 movie recently, where the guy's like walking through the sand. Obviously, you're trying to walk in a different way all the time. You're being super conscious, and we'd walk really slowly. We'd cover maybe 5 or 6 kilometers in a night when we're getting to the target. And yeah, so we got up, and where the crossing area was suspected of, we walked up and we were infiltrating, and we actually walked straight into the base without knowing it. Their guard system wasn't that good, but Mike and I were walking along, and we'd walk in covering, and we never used we just use naked passive night vision equipment or anything. We just used our eyes and moonlight, and it was like we'd walk quite far apart, but be very, very, very tactical. One would walk and the other one would be watching, and we'd be like really slow and tactical. So Mike and I were kind of advancing up, and I saw. I just saw this cow standing there, and I was like, it's not usual, because like normally the cows they collect them and put them in a kraal at night and everything. And there's this cow standing, and I was like, this is weird, and carried on walking, and then suddenly I was amongst tents, and somehow got past the guards, and I was in the base, and it was a Cuban base, and so we knew we were there, and it's kind of interesting because even though you're small teams, you think, you're in the tents, and you can see the guys sleeping and snoring, and think, well, should I just lob a grenade and run away? That's which is just, you don't want to do that. But that was the first thought. So like, no. So we backed out, and then watched, and then everything's slow, So you just back, and people are sleeping and people are not paying attention. So the darkness is your kind of friend, right? So back out, and you're just watching what's going on, and then we walked around, and then we saw the fires where the guards were standing. And so Mike covered me, and then I saw the river, and I saw the old bridge, but then there was a strange structure, and I walked around the fire, and the guards, they were talking, they couldn't see because they were looking into the fire, and there we saw these folding bridges, Soviet folding bridges that they were putting out. So I managed to get around there, and I got onto the bridges, and I had a rope measure which I knew, and I was just measuring the dimensions and everything, and got all the dimensions, got around. Mike was covering. Got around, and then we exfiltrated, and it was we had to lie up the night there, obviously worrying that they might see our tracks and then do a follow up the next morning, but they didn't, and then managed to get back to our kit, pick up the kit, and then obviously as you're making so you have these scheduled times when you make comms with base, so you're not collecting information and then giving it when you get home. You're actually giving all the information as you're giving sked. So if something happens to you, they've got the information in here. So first comms just gave all the details and everything, and then started exfiltrating, and the exfiltration sometimes was super stressful. In this case it was, because we were always wearing, we wore enemy uniform. I was blackface. So getting to the border was always an issue, because you have Kufut and 101, and these folks looking for folks infiltrating, and they'd see you as a potential swapper. So then you have to be super clear in where you could meet up and where you could do things. And typically, in this case, 3-2 Battalion was supposed to meet us at one of the beacons, and we navigated to the beacon, and we didn't walk in the day, but in this case we did. Because we wanted to get out really fast, and actually we got compromised. We got a water hole, and I was holding back, but the locals can see you white, you're not a local, and Mike was kind of like trying to act casual as if he was a fupler, but some of the locals ran off, and then as we were moving away, they started mortaring us. So we just then did a force march to get out. And then the next thing was, how do we get into South Africa? And so we were supposed to meet 3-2 at the beacon, and 3-2 was at the wrong beacon. So I got to this point, it's like, oh guys, now what do we do? So then they'd organized for a helicopter, and they flew a chopper up to the beacon to pick us up, and we flew out. So that is a typical operation. Like how, so I did 3 of those, and then one of our medics was captured. Guy Poppenfuss was captured. And we were in the area actually, and then we were tasked to go over to a certain town where they thought he might have been evacuated to a hospital to see if we could see any activity or anything. I don't know why they made us do that or what were we going to, but anyhow, we did, and we infiltrated into the town, and there was no activity or anything, and he was way gone. I think he's probably in Cuba by then. But the interesting there was, same thing. We cache our kit, infiltrated into the town, walked around, came back, and then there were all these obviously FAPLA units everywhere, all drinking, 14-5 gun positions, and these guys just let rip every now and then, firing automatic everywhere. And every time they did it, obviously you think you're compromised and they're shooting at you, but they were just drunk, doing stupid stuff. But then, then our navigation was so good, like just coming straight back to our cached kit in the dark. Our navigation was really good, and as you said, there's no GPS or anything. We're just all counting steps, walking on bearings, doing even using the stars to navigate with them. And we were so well trained in that. I must say, a whole year's training and the cycle up to then, everything, we did so much navigation training. It was that is really superb how we got trained in that, and it worked really well for us. So yeah, that is a typical way we'd infiltrate, and typically the kit we'd wear was, we'd carry heavy kit, like as I said, sometimes 100 kilograms carrying water, but then our webbing and everything was, I'd carry 2 magazines because I knew if I was in a contact or whatever, I'm done, So there's no fighting a way out of anything. So try to carry as light as possible, and then everything was just equipment to contact, with aircraft or survival equipment, for like medical equipment and stuff. So very little ammunition and stuff, but everything was all around navigation and also keeping notes and writing stuff down, and then your radio equipment was pretty much everything.
Did you have those quick extraction kits that you would strap on for a helicopter?
No, not really. No, we didn't do anything like that. No. The time when I did escape an invasion, we were basically chased for 2 days, and we were heading to the RV area of where we were going to get picked up. I had made contact with the Telstar the night before. The Telstars, they set up a aeroplane up, and with the ultra high frequency radio, you make contact and just confirm everything's okay. So we had done that, and they'd confirmed that they were going to pick us up at the extraction point. So they sent in Pumas, like long range Pumas, but they came in and they landed down, and you climb in. So there's none of that, nothing like that. No.
How aggressive were the Cubans and MPLA in following up? I mean, the Frelimo and Mozambique were quite aggressive. Did you find?
Yeah, they were aggressive. So in that contact, there was a sweep line of it must have been about a platoon, and I was sitting in the all-round defense, the UNITA guys, and the UNITA guys just ran away. Like, they didn't fire a shot, they ran away, and I was there on my own, and I saw the sweep line coming up to me, and they saw me, and they started shooting at me. And yeah, they were super aggressive, and I mean they were throwing lobbing mortars, and the 2 days they chased us, they were just bringing vehicles all the time, and I think I was a white guy. They knew I was white, obviously, and they were trying to get me, and so they were very aggressive. There was just vehicles all over. It was pretty pretty stressful. Yeah.
Do your guys? Well, the question I really want to ask is this more mental than physical? It certainly must be more mental to be an operator like yourself.
Look, I think a lot of it's very physical, because you're clearly walking long distances, and you've got to be able to withstand the heat and everything. And I think the physical has to be there. The mental, I think, comes from being able to operate in certain circumstances. Like I don't think I'd be able to be a Navy SEAL, for example. So like I'm not mentally attuned to the water and that kind of stuff. So I don't think I'll even pass the selection. But I think the mental aspects comes from what you're comfortable with. So I had no problem being in the dark, or I had no problem being on my own. I had no problem. So it's a different type of mentality, I think. And also I wasn't, some guys are very aggressive and they like being in the combat teams and everything. It's not really something that I was into. So I think it's a different mindset for sure. So I mean, everybody has their speciality and their mentality. So I think it is a level of mental, but you have to have the physical as well. So all the guys are, I would say, are, not are upper level, physical guys, like all play sport and everything. So I think the physical obviously is the baseline you have to be in. But I've been like I've been active all my life, and I've raced in my age groups and cycling and running and everything. And I'm not anywhere near the top. Like I'm maybe in the top 25%, but compared to other people, I'm not super athlete or anything. So, and I think that is the case. So I think it's just a combination, like a whole package of like you just have the right physical ability, you have the right mental attitude. Maybe it's a combination of you can carry heavy kit, and I don't know, maybe there's a middle ground kind of persona that fits in because the Americans have got interesting units because they have their Delta Force, which is more like the SAS and the Recce's, all smaller guys, um, you know, and then you have the SEALs, which are these big, massive guys, like it's just different approaches they take, and they have different levels of, I think, required endurance and stamina. But yeah, so I think the physical was important from an endurance perspective, being able to withstand heat and everything, and then just having the right mindset for that kind of thing. Yeah.
Do you think the modern overseas forces could actually track and find their kit at night without all this GPS stuff? It's not really taught to them, is it?
No, it's not. I don't know. I don't know. But also, I mean, I would not go if I was younger now. I would not go to somewhere like Ukraine and operate because I think now with optics that pick up body temperature and
Mm.
and the drones and all that kind of stuff. I think those kind of operations now are very hard. Although probably not because I mean it's going to be slightly different or very different. But I think technology plays a big role now. Where in those days you can get by with just the unexpected.
Mm.
But you could still now, I think, because they're still lazy and they fall asleep and they still don't expect things. So yeah, I'm sure the British Special Forces and these are operating in Ukraine and everything, and they are applying the same skills in a different way. So I don't know if I don't know the level of training where they actually do train with other stuff. I would expect them to, yeah. So yeah, maybe. I would expect folks to be able to operate without the electronic equipment. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe a Rhodesian guy, ex-SAS, has started a big tracking school in America. The Marines were
Yeah. This.
the first to come forward and listen to him.
Yeah. There's actually America's interesting country. There's like a lot of that kind of stuff here. There's a lot of outdoor people, and hunting's a big thing. So a lot of these basic skills are still around. The guys still follow them. Yeah.
Mm.
Uh,
Well, I think we've covered the how-to of going into a camp and what it involves, and then running for 2 days to get away from guys. I mean, there's no way they would have caught me within the first hour. I've never been very good at running, but it's
well,
given
that's
it's given us an overview of what you did. What
that.
maybe the one question I can ask you is, sorry, I keep interrupting you,
Yeah. Yeah.
is what was the scariest experience that you had? What really turned your toes?
That's an interesting question. I think the worst was with that escape of an invasion was when we got to the area we were going to be picked up in. We basically knew we weren't going to be moving anymore, and we had to wait for the helicopters. And that was like about 4 p.m. And we found a kind of like a little hill of like rocks and to hide up in, and we had a lot of area and everything. And we basically knew this is gonna be our last stand because if we have to wait here, they're following up on us, and if they're on our tracks, we're gonna have to fight it out from here. So that waiting for sunset, in that situation, hearing the vehicles and hearing stuff that was probably the most unpleasant I've had. Um, but I was just wanted to mention on that. I mean, having been with the Bushmen and us having to, being in follow-up operations and everything, we were applying a lot of the anti-track techniques that Swapper was applying as well. So we were anti-tracking the whole time. So it's not just running. It's actually you're walking very slowly, changing direction, stepping on whatever you can, taking your shoes off, getting on fences, doing everything you can to break your spur. So we were doing that, for the, and my feet were in shreds afterwards, and we were used to walking a lot, but because of that, because we were walking barefoot and doing all this kind of stuff, that is all testament to that era as well. So, we were walking like sometimes not even seeing each other, that's how far away from each other we were, my partner and I, Mike and I. Yeah, so, applying those techniques that the SWAPO did for us was kind of what saved us too. Yeah.
And were you married or in a relationship during your military career, or did that come after?
So I actually met my wife while I was in 5 Recce, yeah, so she's still married to me now. Yeah. But it is strange that like we never spoke about it really, what we were doing. People knew we were slightly different. We had longer hair and everything, but it was not, no, we weren't, it was not cool to talk about who you were. We never told anybody we were Recce's, or we just did not, So she didn't really know what I was until I left, which is strange. I mean, they kind of obviously knew there was something, because we would be doing free fall courses, or we'd be doing these weird courses, and so she obviously knew I wasn't not a normal conscript or permanent force, but yeah, we didn't speak about it. So yeah, I met my wife then, and she's been through. Went to Israel and spent time in the Israeli military with her, and then I got into technology and was in the UK, and then now I'm in the USA. So she's been along the whole ride. Yeah.
And what did you do with the Israeli military?
Yeah, after South African military, I was motivated to stay in the military, and we couldn't get into. We came up to 1990, came to UK. I tried to get into the SAS. They didn't want to speak to us. Tried to get into the American military as well from the embassy in South Africa. They didn't want to speak to us. So instead of going to executive outcomes, somebody was saying that the Israelis took foreigners, which was not true. But I went to Israel and I spent 5 years, and I finally got into the Israeli military. I became an Israeli citizen and got into the Israeli military, which is another whole. There's actually a chapter on it in Chris's channel.
Interview.
Interview on that. Yeah. But that was another whole experience. Yeah.
That's incredible. What an incredible career. Well, Andre, I think we've got a flavor of what you did, and it's really, really fascinating. I can't thank you enough for coming on board. And I would like, once again, as I always do in these talks, to please encourage viewers to come and give their stories to us. It's very hard to get hold of you fellas. I don't know why. You're just talking about it. And please subscribe and like the channel. And John would like some support. I think he doesn't mind me saying this, because his living is made from this YouTube channel. So if you want to become a Patreon supporter, cost of a couple of packs of cigarettes a month, that'll be wonderful. So we'll end it there. And once again, thank you very much, Andre. It's been a very interesting and enlightening talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for the time. Yeah.
Okay. Cheers, bud.